So, hello. Today we'll be doing a quick recap of the first 18 lectures, and then we'll do tutorial session 2 as the sheet has been shared with you. So, let's quickly recap. So, what I'll do is I will open YouTube and just browse through the lectures and talk as I browse through them. So, we'll start with the 8th lecture. So I'll quickly run through these lectures and in the meantime discuss the lectures as well. So this was lecture number 8. We talked about heat conduction with generation. That was the first discussion topic of that day. So we talked about the equation and heat conduction equation, but we had the generation term as well. And we then solved the equation, and finally we got the solution, which was well, a parabolic solution. And we saw that since there's heat generation happening, so then the heat then leaves through both the boundaries. That's the reason we have this kind of a plot of the temperature profile. Uh, so this I demonstrated, and I also showed that the heat, the Qx, that is the rate of heat flow, the watts, was a function of x. Okay, so for this reason, we could not define a resistance, a thermal resistance for this case, because Q in this case is not simply a constant. Okay, it changes with x. Okay, then we talked about the symmetric situation. So the situation where both boundaries are at Ts temperature. So the center of the bar becomes symmetric, and for that we have the dt by dx, that is the adiabatic boundary condition. So we don't need to solve for the whole bar. We can only solve for one half of the domain by using dt by dx equal to 0 at the x equal to 0 center boundary. And then I showed you towards the end by using an energy balance, that well, energy balance at the surface. What we finally saw was that the amount of heat getting generated in the second half of the domain was equal to the amount that leaves because of convection from the surface. So this was just to reinforce the energy balance ideas. Okay, that's when we moved on to cylindrical coordinates, because we said that it's very important to have an understanding of cylindrical and spherical coordinates, especially cylindrical ones, because we deal with wires, ducts, pipes, etc. a lot, and we insulate them. So we must understand the heat conduction through these symmetries. So the equation we then recalled the r, phi, and z coordinate system. That's a cylindrical coordinate system. The unit vectors in those directions and how the unit vectors change as phi changes. Okay. So just a quick recall as to what we did. Now let's move to the 9th lecture. Oops. Okay, so we proceeded with our discussion on the derivation of grad T and the divergence of F for, I think you can't see my mouse, so let me share my whole screen rather than just sharing Chrome tab. So now I think you can see the mouse as well. That will help me to point. So grad T and the divergence of F is what we derived from first principles. So this approach again can be used for a different coordinate system as well if we desire. Okay. So we proceeded with the definition of grad T, which comes from the change in T dt, which is defined as grad T dot the dr tilde vector in that coordinate system. So this helped us get the components of grad, which we wrote on the right hand side. Then we moved to defining divergence of f in the cylindrical coordinate system again. And for that, we had to be careful with the phi term, e phi term, because there we get a couple of extra terms as well. And finally, we moved on to writing a divergence of k grad t, which is very similar to writing divergence of the vector f. And with this, we were able to write the final expression for the for the divergence of k grad t in the cylindrical coordinate system, out of which we extracted only the r term, because then for wires we assumed that there is no variation in, with phi and z. So ultimately, all we were left with was these first two terms. The one was del by del r of k del t by del r, and the second one was k by r times del t by del r. And this is then this equation is what we applied to the problem for the insulation over pipe carrying hot oil. So then the 10th lecture, we got into a bit of a detail to solve this equation. So we solved this equation, and the solution was then analyzed. We saw a couple of interesting things, that the value of r times k dt by dr was a constant rather than k dt by dr being a constant. So we have to be careful when talking about the watts and the watts per meter squared. That's a flux. Okay, so they cannot be used interchangeably in the cylindrical coordinate systems, because we have a term having an r in the surface area for cylindrical coordinates. Then we simply solved the system. We got a logarithmic solution that we plotted. So the temperature logarithmically drops from the hot inside temperature to the surface temperature of the cold fluid outside. Then we wrote the expression for, since we had the expression for the temperature inside the insulation, the solid insulation, then we wrote the expression for the rate of heat flow, the watts, and we found out that this rate of heat flow helped us define a thermal resistance for these kind of cylindrical systems. That was log of r naught by ri divided by 2 pi l times k. So we use this idea to write the overall resistance in this case. So we had a convective resistance from the inside, then we had a conductive resistance of the insulation, and then we had a convective resistance from the outside cold fluid. Yeah, so this idea was then extrapolated to find a critical radius. So what we said was, we removed the inside resistance. We said that we have a solid body now, and the only resistances we have is conduction in the insulation of an arbitrary thickness r, which we're trying to optimize, and then a convection resistance because of the cold fluid outside. So what we saw was that when you have a total resistance because of conduction and convection, so when you add a conduction resistance, what you notice is that you end up reducing the convection resistance, because you give it more area by adding the insulation to convect heat out. So it can happen, well, up to a certain R, that the gain that you get by adding a resistance of conduction is much less than the gain, the loss that you achieve, the loss that you well, get because of increasing the surface area. And this is where we used calculus to find an optimum radius, and what we realized was that there is indeed an optimum radius, and that optimum radius is k by h. And you can check again by taking the second derivative of the total resistance by r. What you see is that this is actually a minima. So what that means is that by adding a resistance, by adding an insulation, you could actually do more harm than good. So one has to be careful when designing the insulation thickness. for pipelines and spherical bodies. Okay, so we stopped there in our discussion on critical radius, and then we moved on to we briefly talked about heat conduction radial systems with generation. So we had a q dot term in the cylindrical coordinate system. So I won't recap that. That was again very similar to the old previous discussions. And then we moved on to fins. Okay, so fins being very important objects because they help us increase the surface area and hence maximize the rate of heat loss. And these fins are again, we see that a lot in many engineering devices, including automobiles and computers and heaters and so on. So these fins, we first derived the equation for a fin, in this case a pin fin, where the cross-section area was changing. Then once we derived that using the energy balance, we then moved on to applying this equation to a rectangular fin, a simpler situation because the cross-section area is constant in this case. And then for this rectangular case, we solved the system for given boundary conditions. And we saw that the solution we get is an exponentially decaying solution as once we apply the boundary conditions. Okay? So that was done in the next lecture. That was the 12th lecture. Then we moved on to discussing the two important parameters when using or designing fins. One is called fin effectiveness and the other is called fin efficiency. So the first one was fin effectiveness, and one must be careful when defining these terms because people get confused a lot with the definitions. So fin effectiveness is, as the term says, effectiveness. So is it effective to use a fin or not? Okay, so this is the ratio of the rate of heat loss with the fin to the rate of heat loss if you had used no fin at all. So this ratio definitely should be more than 1. Otherwise, you are by adding a fin, you are actually making things worse. But since we are spending some money, etc., and adding a fin, so to compensate that, we typically say that effectiveness should be at least 2, so that it's justified to use the fin. Okay, so we then wrote the expression for to find the Q, because Q with the fin, that is the heat that whatever heat leaves from the base of the fin is ultimately convected out from the surface of the fin. So we can estimate, we can calculate QF using this idea, and then the rate of heat loss without a fin can then be written as H times the cross-section area times the base temperature, the excess temperature at the base. Next, we analyzed the fin effectiveness for an infinite fin and got some intuition as to how the effectiveness changes with different parameters like the thermal conductivity of the fin, the ratio of the perimeter to the cross-section area of the fin, and the heat transfer coefficient H of the fin fluid interface. Okay, so next we talked about the fin efficiency, which again is an extremely important parameter. Now, fin efficiency means once you have decided on putting a fin, then how efficient is that fin? So, so we compare that with an ideal fin, having an infinite thermal conductivity. So that means there's no resistance that the fin provides, and it simply increases the surface area without any overhead. So then again, we have a Q max associated with that fin. So that can be calculated by assuming that the whole fin is at the temperature of the base. So that is what you get if you have infinite thermal conductivity in the fin material. So again, of course, the efficiency can at max be 1 or 100% because you cannot have more than Q max as the rate of heat loss. Okay, then we talked about maximizing, instead of maximizing QF, we maximize QF by VF. So the amount of heat loss per unit material of the fin used, because ultimately that is what you would want to optimize. You can't, because the material cost also has to be taken into account. And we saw that that's ideal for a parabolic fin, which can be approximated to a triangular fin. So one tends to use triangular fins when possible. Okay, then we said that in many cases we machine the fin out of the main surface rather than pasting a fin to the main body because of the issue of the contact resistance. Then we briefly talked about an array of fins. So that's what typically what you'll have. You won't have just one fin, you will have an array of lots of fins machined on a surface. So we can have some efficiency calculations for those arrays as well. So this was lecture number 12. Then the 13th lecture and the 14th lectures were actually on 2D heat conduction. So we here talked about a rectangular bar which is infinitely long in the z direction, and we applied some boundary conditions. In this case, we had hot on the top surface, and the other three surfaces were cold, T1. And what that meant was that we will have some heat flux lines going from T2 to T1 at different boundaries. So we wrote the equation. We assume that it's a steady state situation without any heat generation with a homogeneous thermal conductivity. So that gave us simply a Laplace's equation in T. So we non-dimensionalized the equation and then non-dimensionalized the boundary conditions as well. And that gave us an equation which was then solved using the method of separation of variables. So after applying this method of separation of variables and the boundary conditions, it then gave us an infinite series solution where we also learned how to use the idea of orthogonality of trigonometric functions, sine and cosine functions, to get the values of the constants in this case. So finally, we had an expression for the overall analytical solution. So if you have a computer, you can add these terms in the analytical solution and then get an estimate for your temperature at different points in the 2D domain. In most cases, we see that the contribution of, since you have an infinite series with the Fourier terms, so what you see is that the coefficients of the higher Fourier wave numbers actually go down. So what that means is it's good for the overall temperature. Okay. Then I showed you, I discussed the idea of the computational methods, which are typically used for solving such heat conduction equations, because it is rare that you can get an analytical solution. Then I briefly demonstrated to you the use of the PDE toolbox in MATLAB to solve the same system in this case, and I impressed upon you that it is extremely easy to solve such problems using computers. So we have nice software available now that engineers have written, mostly mechanical engineers, because they're the ones who actually need this solution. Okay, so this was where we moved to unsteady heat conduction, the situation where the temperature is a function of time as well. And here we said that we'll proceed in three major steps. The first one being assuming that temperature is only a function of time. The second one assuming that where this assumption of simply a function of time cannot be used, so spatial dependence also is important. And the third one, where one of the spatial dimensions tends to infinity, that's called the semi-infinite analysis. Okay, so we proceeded with the lumped capacitance analysis, where we could assume that the spatial dependence on the temperature is almost negligible. So that means the whole body is at almost the same temperature, and it very quickly reaches that temperature. So the time response is very quick. The major difference between the temperature is between the body and the surrounding fluid that is cooling it. So here we could not apply the heat conduction equation, but we applied the energy balance equation, and we derived the equation and we solved it, and we saw that it is extremely analogous to our RC circuits. Okay, so R being thermal resistance because of conduction, and R being the thermal resistance because of convection between the body and the fluid, and C being the capacitance, that is the storage capacity, because of the internal energy that the body can store. So we analyzed that a bit, and then we moved on to the discussion where we were not sure whether this analysis can be used or not. So we defined a new non-dimensional quantity called the bio number, which is the ratio of H L by K, H being the heat transfer coefficient between the body and the fluid, that's either heating or cooling it, LC being a characteristic length that typically is taken as the length in the body across which the temperature difference exists, and K being the thermal conductivity of the solid body. So we said that if this bio number is less than 0.1, then we are good to use the lumped capacitance analysis. But if the bio number is greater than 0.1, then we have to we cannot neglect the spatial dependence. And this discussion came from the idea of when we defined bio number, we took it as the ratio of the temperature drop across the solid to the temperature drop between the solid and the convecting fluid. We drew a couple of temperature profiles, and then finally we solved a problem of a thermocouple junction where we use this idea of lumped capacitance analysis. Okay. Next, we moved on to the second step in the unsteady heat conduction system, where we said that the spatial dependence is important. So in that case, first we wrote the heat conduction equation with the boundary conditions in a non-dimensionalized system. And I did not solve it because it's a bit complicated to solve it. So I simply gave you the solution after formulating the equation in the form of an infinite series solution. Again, you can use the idea of separation of variables to solve it yourself if you need. And we also saw that the dependence of temperature, which in a dimensional when written in a dimensional form, is dependent on the x and t values. Plus, it also depends on the initial temperature of the solid body, the temperature of the fluid that's cooling it or heating it, the length, the characteristic length of the system, the thermal heat conductivity, and the value of rho c along with the H value. So there's a lot of dependence. So once you non-dimensionalize the system, the dependence simply is on x star, t star, and the bio number. Okay, so you don't need to solve lots of problems. You simply can generate for a given geometry. You can generate for different bio numbers and x star and t star values. You can generate the theta star values, and then those tables or those dictionary of solutions can then be used for getting the temperature for any system. So the idea of non-dimensionalization helps us a lot by saving a lot of time for solving the systems. And two systems may be similar to each other. That means that they may have the same bio number. So you don't need to solve for different. You don't need to solve them again and again. You can just solve it once and then substitute the values of the non-dimensional variables and get the solution. Okay, we had a brief discussion about the importance of the Fourier number and its meaning, and then I gave you the solution, which was written again, as you can see, in terms of this infinite series. And then we said that if our Fourier number is greater than 0.2, that's your t star value greater than 0.2, then you can simply approximate this solution as the first term, that is n equal to 1 term in this series. Okay, because we see that the coefficient of the Fourier terms go down as e to the power of minus lambda square t star. So as your time increases, the contribution of these coefficients, subsequent coefficient for higher n values, will go down exponentially. Right. So then we our previous lecture, which was shared with you offline, was on the semi-infinite analysis. So this was the third discussion topic in our unsteady heat conduction. And here we talked about the situation where one of the dimensions, spatial dimensions, tends to infinity. Of course, I mean, you won't see real systems which have infinite dimensions that you will deal with, but even for small dimensions, when your Fourier numbers Fourier numbers small, then you can use this idea of semi-infinite analysis, because the rate at that, because of for small times, the information because of a step change on the boundary has not penetrated deep enough. So you can use the idea of semi-infinite analysis even for small spatial lengths, as long as your T star or the Fourier number is small. Okay, so we solved the system mathematically using an idea called similarity variables. So we defined a new variable eta, which was some ratio of functions of x and t, which helped us write our PDE as ODE with the boundary conditions. So we could simply write an ordinary differential equation, which was then easily solved to obtain the temperature in terms of the error function, which is an integral of the normal distribution profile, e to the minus x square, a normalized normal distribution. Okay. And then we also discussed, we calculated the QS double prime, and then we talked about the idea of penetration depth, which is the depth for a given time. That's the depth at which 90% of the effects have penetrated, the surface effects have penetrated. So you can easily calculate that as proportional to square root alpha t. And then I briefly discussed an example, but I didn't solve it, to again show that even for a smaller length, in this case 3 millimeters, we could use this analysis, because we're talking about very small Fourier number values here. So this was a very quick recap of the lectures after the first tutorial. Now, do we have any question? But only one person.
Sir. Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have doubt in boundary conditions of lecture 17th.
Boundary condition of lecture 17. Okay. Which boundary condition do you have problem in?
So that dou theta star by dou x star at x star is equals to 0.
Okay.
Sir, here at x star is equals to 1.
This one?
Second one.
That's BC1, right?
BC second one. At x star is equals to 1.
At 1, okay. So what is not clear here?
Sir, that t star of 1 comma t star, theta star.
Okay, so it's not clear. How did we get 1 comma t star? So you'll have to tell me what is not clear. I mean, I could show that how you get this, but what is not clear here? How you get this boundary condition, is that what is not clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is achieved. This is obtained from the previous boundary condition we had. So let's look at our time dependent system. Right. So you see this equation number 2. Sorry, boundary condition number 2. Is that clear? So this was for the dimensional system. So we said that on this right boundary at x equal to L, we have heat conducting out, which is minus k del T by del X at x equal to L, is equal to the heat that is convecting out because of the fluid, which is H times T at this length minus T infinity.
Okay, sir.
Right? So we then use this to obtain our second boundary condition. So if you want, I can show that to you. Do you want me to do that right now?
No, sir.
So if
But
you go to the YouTube lectures, at one point I actually show you that when you non-dimensionalize by putting theta star as t minus t infinity upon ti minus t infinity, and then you use x star as x upon L. When you substitute these things, you will get that boundary condition automatically.
okay, I have substituted, but I will try once again.
No, I can well I can show it if you already tried this. Then let me copy this and then share my screen with you. So we have minus k del t by del x at x equals L. This, so we're talking about doing an energy balance on the right ball, which is x equal to L, is equal to h times t at x equal to L minus t infinity. And the theta star we defined was t minus t infinity divided by t initial minus t infinity. So this allowed us to write. Let me confirm that again. Right. So this allowed us to in this case our theta then varies between 0 and 1. So on the surface, your temperature becomes, well, outside the surface becomes T infinity, and the initial temperature was Ti. So initially theta is 1. So theta starts with 1 and then ultimately approaches 0.
Sir, it's theta star, I think.
Yeah, theta star. Sorry. Right. So let's go to our first equation, and then we can substitute. So T can be written as theta star times Ti minus T infinity plus T infinity. And we are doing a del by del x of this whole thing at x equal to L. And on the right hand side, we have h, then we have t minus t infinity. So we already know that t minus t infinity is theta star times ti minus t infinity. So del by del x of t infinity becomes 0. So what we, and ti minus t infinity is a constant. So this becomes del theta star upon del x at x equal to L is h theta star times ti minus t infinity. Okay, so this ti minus t infinity gets cancelled. Okay, so I have minus k del theta star by del x at x equal to L, and this is equal to h theta star. Okay, and remember this h theta star on the right hand side is at x equals to L, because the right hand side bound the equation number 1 had t at x equal to L here. That means theta star was also equal to at x equal to L. Okay, so now also remember that x star was defined as x upon L. So at x equal to L, my x star becomes 1. So I can write minus k and then del theta star. So x is nothing but x star times L. So this becomes del x star, and I can take the L out. And this is at x star equals 1. And this is equal to h theta star. And now since we're talking about x star, so at x equal to L, x star is equal to 1. So HL by K is the bio number, and then we have this at x star equal to 1. I also should have written t, because x star is a function of x in t. So this is a boundary condition is for all times. Okay. So I should have written this all over earlier. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Cool. So we still have half an hour, well, a couple of minutes. So I uploaded the tutorial. So we will briefly go through the tutorial. So let's download the tutorial sheet. So I guess you can see the screen now. So this is sorry, this is the second tutorial. So the first problem says that for a spherically symmetric case, the Fourier's law of heat conduction is given as QR. It's a spherical system, and the heat flow in the r direction is given as minus k dt by dr, where QR is a radial rate of heat transfer, K is the thermal conductivity of the spherical insulation, and A is 4 pi r square, which is the area normal to the radial direction. So instead of cylindrical system, we have a spherical system now. And the first problem, first question asked is, if the insulation internal and external radii are R1 and R2 respectively, with temperatures T1 and T2 respectively. So we have the temperatures at the inner and outer radii of the insulation are given to us. We have to find the heat transfer rate, that is QR, in terms of the boundary temperatures T1 and T2. Okay. So let us do that. So we have this is sphere, and there's an insulation. This is R1, and the outer radius is R2. And it's given that QR, so remember that in cylindrical coordinates, we also derived the Q, R, Q phi, and Q z. So in this case, you have QR, Q theta, and Q phi. So QR in the rth direction is given as minus K A dt by dr. So there's only radial heat flow. So you have a solid spherical object, and then you have an insulation over it, a solid insulation, and there is some convection happening from the outer surface. So the first part is if the temperatures are T1 and T2, that the temperatures are given to us, we have to write QR in terms of the temperatures. Okay, so it's very straightforward. I mean, if you want, if the temperatures are given, you can use your Fourier's law of heat conduction and integrate that. So I can write this as QR equals minus K. Now, this is written for an arbitrary R. Okay, so let's say that I write this for some radius R. So that means that the area for that radius is 4 pi R square, and then you have dt by dr. Then I can move around the terms. So I get QR, and then I can move the R square here. So this becomes 1 by R square. Well, dr by R square. On the right hand side, I keep minus 4 pi K, and then you have dt. Now I have to integrate. So I'll integrate this. 4 pi and K are all constants. So this integral is here. And I also know that QR is a constant. The reason being that in this case, like you had in cylindrical case, whatever heat flows out from the inner radius is what flows out to any arbitrary radius, and that is what flows out to the outer radius. Okay, there's no generation here, so QR does not change with R. Okay, so I can keep the integral. So QR is not a function of R in this case. You can also check by writing the equation, but this idea is sufficient to show that QR is not a function of R at all. So and then we integrate this from R1 to R2, that is from temperatures T1 to T2. So this becomes QR, and then we have R to the minus 2 being integrated. So that's minus 2 times 1 by R from R1 to R2. So I can move around the terms, and my QR finally becomes so that's the expression for QR in terms of T1 and T2. So that was what was asked to us in this problem. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's move to the second part. So the second part says find the expression for the conduction resistance in spherical conduction. Okay, so we have to find our conduction in this case of spherical coordinate system. Okay, so again, remember how did we define RT conduction? So we defined that as V equals IR, so R is V upon I. So V in this case is delta T and I is your Q. Okay, so delta T is nothing but T1 minus T2, and this is UR. So if I go back, I already have my T2 minus T1, so that's my delta T, and this is my current. So my conduction resistance can then be calculated as T2 minus T1 upon QR. So which becomes, well, this should be T2 minus T1. It's 1 by R2 minus R1 divided by 2 pi K. Okay, so that's your expression for the conduction resistance. I must check if because your R2 is greater than R1, so I think we made a mistake with the minus sign somewhere, because this resistance has to be positive. QR was minus K, so this was correct, and then we integrated that, so we still had a negative sign. We integrated 1 by R square, that was okay, so there's no minus 2. Okay, I made a mistake here. So we integrated R to the minus 2. So this is R to the minus 1 upon minus 1. So this is just a negative sign here. This negative sign got cancelled. And then we had QR as T2 minus T1 upon 1 by R2. Yeah. This is correct. So okay, well, this is 4 pi K firstly. So that's not a problem. We can always, because we define conduction resistance as positive, so we can check again later, but resistance cannot be negative in this case. So we change the delta T accordingly. So this gives us a positive value, and this is the expression for our conduction resistance. All right, so the third part in this problem is firstly, it is asked what is critical radius. So again, we already discussed what critical radius is. So that's the radius, that's the radius for which your rate of heat flow, if you add an insulation in the to a certain thickness of insulation, your rate of heat flow will actually increase. That is, the total resistance will decrease. And then once you start increasing the radius further beyond the critical radius, then you will see that the insulation resistance will start increasing again. So that is what critical radius mean. But and we have been asked, is there a critical radius associated with the spherical insulation in this problem? So what we have to do is, we, like we did in cylindrical coordinates, we have to write the overall resistance. So if I go back here, so let's draw the figure again. Well, let's use a new page. Okay, so let's call the internal radius as R1, but we are still working on deciding what the insulation thickness is. So let's say that we have put an insulation for a thickness of R, and on the outside we have some convection happening by a fluid of temperature T infinity, and the heat transfer coefficient is H. So in this case, let's draw the thermal circuit. So the first resistance we have is the conduction resistance because of the insulation. So we call it RT conduction. And then we have a convection resistance because of the convection to the fluid, that we call RT convection. The temperature outside is T infinity, and the temperature inside, let's say, is T1. It was given as T1. So the total resistance in this case is the sum of the conduction and convection resistance. So the conduction resistance we just now found out was 1 upon R1 minus 1 upon R divided by 4 pi k. Okay, so the outer radius is 1 by outer radius is R here, because we're still working on deciding the insulation thickness. And then you have the convection resistance, which is 1 upon H times A. A is the outside surface area, which is 4 pi. Then you have R square. Okay. So you have a critical radius if your D times R total by D small r is 0. So let's do that. So 1 by 4 pi k can be taken common, and d by d r of r 1 by r1 is 0, because r1 is a constant, and then we have d by dr of r to the minus 1, which becomes a minus 1, which is, that makes it a plus, and then you have 1 by r squared. Okay, and then on the second term you have 1 upon 4 pi h, and then you have 1 by r squared, so that becomes, let's keep this as a constant, and 1 by r squared, so r to the minus 2, so this becomes a minus 2 upon r cube, and this has to be 0. Okay, so this I can take 1 upon, so this 2 makes it a 2, so I can take a 1 upon 2 pi common, and then I get and I can also take an r square common, so this gives me 1 upon 2k, the first term. The second term gives me 1 upon h times r. And this is 0. Okay, so what this gives us is 1 by 2k is equal to 1 by hr, which basically tells me that r is equal to 2k by h, and this r is the critical radius. So that means that you can take the second derivative also, and I'll say that check that d2r total by dr is, since we are expecting the resistance to be minimum at the critical radius, that means this is a minima, so that means this is greater than 0. You check it yourself. So we do see that there's a critical radius associated, which is 2k by h in this spherical insulation as well. So that is it. So we'll stop here. I'll let you solve the problem number 2 from this tutorial by yourself. So in case we have questions, I can address them, but I'll stop the recording now.